Okay, and welcome back to everyone, and thanks for posting your answers, and genuinely some just really, really good work there from yesterday. It just seems like every week your answers are getting stronger and stronger, and just some really good progress made, not just overall, but for some individuals I can see that you're really making big jumps. So I guess thanks for paying so much attention, and like just fair play to everyone for just really getting stuck in and really giving it a good go, and it's very obvious that you're all trying, and some great improvements. So some strengths that I noticed this week were your use of adjectives and adverbs, and that was something that I worked on in the demo lesson. But it's easy for me to tell you to do it, but when you actually go ahead and do it yourselves and produce the materials, and it's just a really, really good job with this. And not just using more, but using them accurately and using a variety and kind of knowing when and when not to, and just really, really good work with this. The structure and content, this was good, but to be honest, this has always really been good. I don't think that's I wouldn't say an improvement, but definitely a strength. More variety of vocabulary, so there were less people using the words increased and decreased throughout their whole essay. So a lot more variety this time around, which again is something I was hoping and wanted you to do, and it's just great to see it happening. Overviews and key features were pretty much flawless. There were only 4 categories today, or yesterday, so I don't think it was very challenging, but at the same time it's just great to see everybody getting it right. Including more than one piece of data in each sentence. This is something that I was onto you from the start, from like the first demo lesson that I did, and it's happening. It was clear that you finally understood what I was trying to explain and what I was trying to get from you. So very obvious improvement in this particular area, and one that I'm particularly happy to see because it makes your writing so much stronger without actually improving your abilities that much. So it's just more a way of thinking about it more than a way of improving your writing, but it will have a much better impact on the examiner and on your score. And next up then, I was saying cohesive devices, and again, more cohesive devices were used throughout all of your essays, and good accuracy and good variety with this again. I would say this is still an area where you can make improvements, but the strength is that you have improved already. Accuracy of data, so I didn't notice any figures being reported incorrectly, which didn't happen a lot, but there were instances in previous essays. But just looking at your essays today, I didn't notice even one figure being used incorrectly. And yeah, so basically nearly everything is strong. You're doing a really, really good job, which of course makes my job a little bit difficult because I'm supposed to tell you how to improve, even though you're doing nearly everything well already. So what I've come up with is just a few examples for each weakness. So I didn't just choose a weakness or a mistake that one person made. I chose one example of this mistake. So that was the question there. And thanks to Anthony for posting up the screenshot, because some of you had difficulties seeing the data, seeing the figures. I live in Vietnam, so I actually schedule these videos on Facebook to be posted at, well, 8 o'clock my time, which is 1 o'clock UK time. So by the time it actually comes up in the group, in the Facebook group, I'm moved on. I'm doing something else. So thanks again, Anthony, for just clearing that up and making it easier for everyone else while I was away from my computer. Thank you for that. So one thing that we had was poor synonyms, and again there were a few examples of this. So here we have overall there was a slight increase in students going via bicycle and a considerable inclination in case of commuting via automobiles, whereas scholars travelling by bus decreased modestly and by walking declined significantly over the 15 years. So basically this person has forced themselves to use synonyms even though they weren't 100% sure if these synonyms were right or wrong. Now this can have a bad effect on your answer, a bad effect on your score, whereby you're losing out on your vocabulary, you lose out on your accuracy, and it could affect your coherence and cohesion, in that if the mistake is serious enough that the examiner won't understand what you're saying. So this will lead to problems with that also. So inclination, again, it sounds kind of right. It sounds similar to words that you could use, but that just doesn't have the same meaning. The problem with automobiles then is that we had bicycles and walking included, so that there wouldn't actually, the word automobiles doesn't describe the 4 categories that we're talking about. And a scholar isn't a word we really use too much anymore, but basically it's like a very well-educated person, not necessarily a person who's studying, but somebody who would be very well educated. So, I mean, it's not specifically these are the only mistakes I found, but in general, just be more careful that you know what synonyms you're using. Make sure that you know they're correct, and like I said before, just copy the word from the question if you're not sure. It's better to be right than hoping you're right. Umbrella term, so what I was looking at here was form of transports. Again, it should be form of transportation, but I'm not looking at the grammar. What I'm talking about is the umbrella term, meaning you're trying to describe the categories bicycle, car, bus, and walking by saying forms of transport. But again, walking wouldn't fit into this one. So in the last slide you saw automobiles, which wouldn't include bicycles or walking, and this time forms of transport wouldn't include walking. So just be careful of kind of umbrella terms like this that don't actually describe the particular categories, or don't include all of the particular categories you're trying to refer to. Incorrect noun for category. This was a mistake that you guys were making a while back, maybe on the first demo lesson I did with you, and it's starting to creep back in again. So here's our noun phrase: students who walked to get to and from school. So that there is an attempt at a noun phrase, but as a noun phrase, when you're saying that they dropped, that doesn't describe what you're trying to describe. So what you would want to say is the number of students who walked to get to and from school had dropped significantly. So it's the number dropped, not the physical people that dropped. So just make sure again that when you're writing the noun phrases or the names for the categories, that you're including what it is that increased, not the name of the category. Overkill on data. Overkill basically just means too much. And when I read the sentence, I'm left feeling like I have too many pieces of information to deal with in my brain, and it kind of overcrowds inside my head, if you know what I mean. And that if you had two figures, that would have been enough. But here we have the growth of the percentages of cycling was similar to those of driving, soared from 17% in 1985 by 8% to peak at 25% in 2005. Now, in a way, you're just repeating yourself. So if you had said soared from 17% by 8%, that would have been fine. Or soared from 17% to 25%, that would be fine. Or soared by 8% to 25%, again, that would have been fine. But when you're kind of giving me the start, the end, and what the difference is in between, it's just too much. And it's basically you're repeating yourself, but also making it more difficult to understand. So don't feel that doing more data or including more data is making your answer stronger. You need to include the relevant data, not as much as possible, like this. Now, again, this is one example of several instances of this. So it doesn't mean that if you didn't write this exact sentence that you didn't do it. So please go back, look at your own answers, not just for this, but for all the things I'm mentioning, and just try to find these mistakes in your answers. If you find them, that's a good thing because you're noticing mistakes and you're learning how to improve. If you don't find them, again, that's a good thing because you're not making these mistakes, but it's good to be aware of this, be aware of the typical mistakes so that if you didn't kind of, if you weren't aware of them already, you can avoid them also. Repetition. So here I had the sentence, mostly students used to go to schools by walking with over a third in 1985, but it dropped to almost 22% in the 15-year period, and travelling by bus also went down from 21% in 1985 to almost 18% in 2000. So the repetition here is mainly in the years, in 1985, then 15 later, 1985 again, and in 2000. Now, you have already stated this information in the paraphrase, so in your first paragraph. So we already have the information about 1985 to 2000. It's very likely in your overview, and if you're saying it again twice in this details paragraph, there's too much repetition, and it's going to take away from your coherence and cohesion, and makes it just more difficult to follow. So if it's going to be obvious what you're talking about, you don't need to repeat 1985 2000, 1985 2000 the whole way through. Okay, so this one here is the same as I did last week. Basically, I've taken 7 sentences which have mistakes. I've just taken them at random, really, and what I want you to do is pause the video and try to correct these mistakes by yourselves with a pen and paper. After that, I'll show you the answers. So in 5 seconds, I'm going to proceed. So pause now and correct these sentences first. And just like last week, again, I have underlined where the mistakes are, and the purpose of doing this is that I can just kind of highlight where the mistakes are for those of you who didn't find them. And I'll just give you another 5 seconds to spend a bit more time working on this by yourself. So pause the video again now. Right, and finally I have the corrections, and I just want to talk a little bit about some of them. If you're not ready to listen to me again, just pause. But what I wanted to say about number 1, there was for travelling, I removed that. So for travelling was in here somewhere, and it's already obvious that what the purpose is because of the paraphrase and because of the overview. So you don't need to repeat it. You might have corrected it by putting it in, like by changing the form, by changing the grammar, but I decided to remove it. There's a small, if you had high school, I mean, to be honest, it's not the biggest mistake, but basically in the UK there's a different school format where you have primary and secondary, and that takes children from 5 years old up to 18 years old. And then in the US, I'm not 100% sure, but I think it's something like a elementary, junior high school, and high school. I think there are 3 different schools that take students from 5 to 18. I might be wrong about that, but to use high school as a synonym of secondary school isn't completely accurate. And this one I actually forgot to change myself. That was supposed to be 15-year period. So just be careful be careful not to make the mistake I just made. I think that was all pretty much okay, except that this original mistake had said 1 school, whereas the data is about all students from all schools. So that little mistake would make an impression on your score as well. Number 3, I think, was pretty straightforward, except that when we talk about place, so like first place, second place, third place, is usually to do with like a tournament or a competition of some description. So here I've just replaced like most common method, least popular means of transportation used, and with the second highest figure, to avoid using this word place. And this is something that is used by students quite often, but it's not describing what you want to describe. So I would say you're probably better off avoiding this word here than using it to describe the highest and the lowest categories in the charts. Everything else was just pretty much grammatical errors, so I don't have a great deal to say about any of those. I wanted to ask you, so I've been doing this in the previous, the feedback for the previous lessons also, and I just want to know in general, are you actually doing this activity, and do you find it beneficial? So I mean, if nobody's doing it, there's no need for me to continue. If you're doing it, but you think it's no advantage or no benefit to you, I will also not continue doing it. But if you guys think that this is something that's good for you, that you're kind of finding mistakes and it's helping you with error correction, I can continue to do it. So please just give me a little bit of feedback on this, this style of correcting other students' mistakes to help you improve your grammar and your ability to find errors. As always, I've just kind of, like a patchwork quilt, I've just taken 1 paragraph from 4 different students and pieced it together into a complete, strong answer. I haven't corrected any of the grammar or any of the vocabulary mistakes, so this is not like a flawless answer, but this is a very strong answer. And finally, I just wanted to point out, I was talking about you still have improvement for your use of cohesive devices, and I wanted to just show you a way that you can improve yourselves. So when you look at, so this is the task 1, sample 1 from the Band 9 essay bank in the course, and I've just underlined the cohesive devices, and you can just see that they're very, very subtle. So a lot of the cohesion is with pronouns and with references back and forward to the information. But when you look at the actual cohesive devices used, there's subtlety, despite, before, finally, when, before. There isn't much attention drawn to it when you're reading it. So I'm not saying that using like whereas and while and the other ones that I pointed out in the demo lesson. I'd say continue using those, but what I would like you to do is go through the sample, the essay bank, and just look at the different samples and look at how the cohesive devices are used, and just in particular, let's say for example this word despite is one that you're not really sure why it's used this way. Spend a bit of time looking at it, try to figure out, okay, what two things is this connecting, and what change is happening in the information that allows despite to be used in between them, and then go back, have a look at a dictionary, see the explanation, go online again, take a look at some different sentences with this word in it to see if you fully understand how it's used. And that's like the first step of like improving your use of cohesive devices. It should be that you are figuring out a complete understanding of this word before you go and use it. So I would recommend you do this for pretty much all the essay bank for task 1, because this is an area that you guys still have some improvements to make. Okay, as usual, if you have any questions, please just pop it in the comments underneath, and like I said, just give me some feedback on whether you want to continue looking at the errors and then correcting them like we did in the previous step. Okay, thank you all everybody, and see you again next week.